Okay, so how are you doing today, Francesco?
Not bad, I must say, not bad. Even though the situation in London is slightly strange at the moment, not doing bad.
So are you located in Italy? I know that I believe you were born
Uh,
there.
yeah, I was born in Italy, but I live part of my time in London, a part of the time deep in southern Italy in Puglia. So I travel to and fro quite a lot.
So is that why you use different locations and cutting edge? Because I know that there is some parts in Italy, but they also go to different places. Is that inspired by your experience in different areas of the world?
It's inspired by my experiences, yes, in a way, but not necessarily by my direct experience, even though that's part of it as well. I think we live in a marvelous world, and I like the idea that we are here to explore it. And some of us might explore it traveling physically, as the edgers do. Some of us might explore it even just through books, and that's enough. But we are born to explore. That's quite important to me.
I really like that answer, but I also really like that you use some, I believe there's some Italian in the actual book. Is that your first language?
Italian is my first language, yes. I write in English these days. I mostly work in English, but I was born Italian and Italian is my first language. Actually, I only learned English when I was 28 or so.
So when you first wrote Cutting Edge, at least like for your first drafts, was it entirely in Italian or was that always in English from the start?
No, it was always in English from the start because it was originally published in French. And our French editor didn't speak any Italian. So the author and I, the artist and I, even though we are both Italians, would communicate in English so that our editor could understand what we were saying.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's start off. Let's talk about Cutting Edge for people who are not familiar with it. Can you kind of give a pitch to, to interest readers in it from your perspective, the actual creator?
It's the story. I'm one of the creators. I think that the artist is as much as a creator as I am, and we've been exchanging ideas all the time. And I strongly believe in artists in comic books anyway. But from my perspective, at least, I can say the Cutting Edge is the story of a bunch of geniuses being challenged to a world-spanning adventure. So they will have to fight each other, but most importantly, they will have to learn to work with each other. And for a genius, that's really hard. There are plenty of stories about lone geniuses like the Doctor Who or Sherlock Holmes, But what happens when you bring a bunch of geniuses together? So that's what the story tries to answer.
Now, I believe there's five of the geniuses that we kind of follow. They're very diverse. Were there any other, when you initially put this team together and were creating these characters, were these the five that you guys had initially foresaw, or were there any other characters that you guys kind of went through before landing on the five main characters?
We had plenty of characters, and some of them show here and there in the story. But we were sure that we wanted to tell the story of these five because their characters blend together. Actually, the characters came before the plot. So we had the story idea, we started talking characters, and then we went into the plot.
So I really like the diversity there, and the storylines for each one are very interesting. But I want to talk a little bit more about like the mythological aspect of this. And you have like, for instance, not to give too many spoilers, but there is a siren in the book. Um, can you tell me, was that uh, was it inspired by a specific story or some kind of other media in which you have experienced sirens, or just based on mythological beasts?
It's mostly based on the mythological base. I'm hugely passionate about mythology. I think it's the grammar of humankind. Mythology is what joins all of us, really worldwide, with all our incredibly interesting and rich differences. So world mythologies are very different. I don't believe in those say that they are all actually the same. They are very different, but they join us at an emotional level. So I'm quite passionate about mythology. And Italian mythology in particular, and the Mediterranean mythology more in general, is incredibly rich and sometimes not very well known. For example, you were mentioning Siren, which is are a part of the book, but sirens, as we know them in mythology, are quite different from sirens as we tend to conceive them today. They weren't half fish, for example.
Hmm.
Just to begin.
And I loved the way that the siren was depicted in the first chapter there, especially with the character. Uh, I I can't remember the musician's name, um, Ernesto, or I can't
Hmm.
remember. But okay, so the character, the musician's name, like his relationship, his love for the siren, and the way that it is communicated through music, and the way that he expresses it through his music, and how he's trying to communicate. Do you have any like music experience in your life that kind of inspired that specific exchange between those characters, or is that something that you just thought because sirens, sound, music, decided to kind of build from there?
It was the particular idea comes from an interview I did to Noel Gallagher a few years ago. And while I was interviewing him, he said he was dreaming of writing the perfect love song. And one day he would write this song which was absolutely perfect, which would make all people sing and just be happy and just couldn't resist it. I don't even know if you remember saying that, but they stayed with me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I years later, when I was writing this story, I thought back of that time and said, you know what, that's a nice angle, because music is an incredibly powerful emotional language. So
Yeah, and especially like I think a good point that they had made was that the siren wasn't singing with vocals, but it was like vocalizations, and it doesn't need words. It can be communicated across. I guess for somebody who speaks multiple languages, it can be communicated with anybody, whether it's mythological beasts who don't speak English or otherwise. So I really like that connection using music.
absolutely, I think that's something that music has in common with comic books. Scott McCloud once said that a good comic book should be possible to read, should be readable, even if you don't speak the language. So the art itself should carry the story enough that you can understand at least what's going on, even if you don't speak a word of the language in which it's written. And the same goes for music, really. If you're listening to even just a pop song that really works in a language that you don't speak, it will probably transport you even though you can't understand exactly what's happening at the level of the words.
So this the cutting edge is not your first project, right?
In It's my first comic book, but
First comic.
I've been a professional author. I've been writing novels, I've been writing films, I've been writing all sorts of stuff,
So when did
non-fiction as
you
well.
when did you decide to jump into comics? And did you have an interest in the medium before you joined it?
The first thing I did when I turned 18 was a tattoo with Superman shield on my arm. So yes, it's I go back comic books, and
Nice.
I don't regret that for a moment. I never regretted it. I'm 40 now, and I'm still as happy of it as I was when I was 18. So no, it's always been. I always dreamed of doing comics, but I never quite had the chance up to the time. But then Mario, the artist, got in touch with me because he had read a book of mine, a steampunk retelling of Eliza's adventures in Wonderland, and he loved the visuals of it, even though it was just a novel, so there weren't any actual visuals. But he liked the way in which my visual imagination worked, and he said, "Why don't we do a project together?" And then we started bouncing ideas, and we came up with Cutting Edge.
That's really cool, especially that you could communicate, like your writing communicated visuals to an artist, like to somebody in that medium. That's amazing. That had to be super very validating for you. Um, when you first decided to move into this medium, obviously you were excited about comic books, you're a big fan of comic books, but was there any hesitation for you to move to the comic medium when you were first, approached about that?
Not at all. It was a dream come true, literally. The only hesitation was technical, because I think that when it comes to the challenge itself, comic book script is the single most challenging thing a writer can write. It's harder from a strictly technical point of view. It's much harder than novels. It's also much harder than writing the script writing for cinema or television, because you need to imagine action, but you also need to be able to divide the action into quite specific chunks. And that's quite hard. That's quite challenging. It's easy to mess it up.
So I guess with that being said, before the final edit, were there any big things, whether they're story beats or anything that just didn't make the cut based on you having to trim it down to this new medium?
No, I was thinking within this new medium. So I was trying to understand. We were trying to understand with Mario how to tell this story within this particular medium, which is the French declination of this particular medium, which is particular as well because it has larger pages than either American or Italian comics and less than that. So you need a different grammar there as well. The editor let us do because the project itself was so completely batshit crazy to begin with. They say, it's well, we were breaking the rules since day one because they say that you should never have a story entirely about geniuses because they're not relatable. So, like Doctor has always one or more companions, you should make this. So we were breaking the rules literally since the first page. So they just let us do.
And I love how each of the characters had, something that kind of made it so that the other people in the story had presumptions about them. Like for instance, there was the sex tape, and that kind of like defined how everybody treated this woman, even though she had a lot more to offer. And everybody's like, oh, from the video. And I like how it contrasted like the level of what we see versus what is under there for these characters. That's just one example, but I really like that 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 kind of dissonance there between the way people see them and the way that they actually are. And I wanted to know, because I know you said that you envisioned and you were trying to work within the medium, but having written so many novels and things like that, was it tough for you to trim down to the page? Like, was it tough for you to wrap your mind into this medium, or do you think it's something that kind of was seamless for you?
It was just a different process. My prose writing is quite lean anyway. So I like prose. So I use descriptions. I'm not Elmore Leonard, but at the same time, I keep it quite lean and quite trimmed in novels as well. It was just different. I think that if you're a writer, you should be able to convey a character even in a single sentence, if that's what's required. So it is a matter of adapting to the medium you're working in. It requires a lot of humility and it requires frankly, the capacity to learn all over again. But it's not inherently harder. That's what I mean.
So did you have to make conscious choices of like certain story that you wanted to express, but only expressing it with art versus having to use words? Because like you said, being able to trim down, a character and express them with just a single sentence, were there times that you decided, even though I would normally word this, I don't need words for this because there's visuals that will accompany, and I can choose my words more carefully. Do you feel like that was easier for you to get your story out?
It was quite an interesting process because in novels, if you want something to happen, you can just make it happen. You have no problems with space. You have no problems with budget. I mean, comic books don't have any problems with budget either, but they have strong problems with space. You have those pages, and those are the pages you need to use. So you need to be quite cruel when it comes to the story beat and how you organize them. You need to be surgically precise, which is one of the many things that make a comic book script so challenging. Because in cinema, you can always get away. You can find a slightly cheaper way of doing the same thing. With comic books, if it is 48 pages, it's 48 pages. It's not 49 and it's not 47. So it requires a lot of discipline. And also, I think the words in visual media, such as comic books or film, can be quite a cheap way of moving the story forward, especially when you're working with an extremely talented artist, as Mario, as I was blessed with. It's important that you give the artist an opportunity to do their best, an opportunity to shine. You are, in a way, at the service of the art, same as the art is at the service of the story, but it needs to go both ways. So sometimes I was creating situations in which I wasn't only worrying about how to move the story forward and how to tell my characters. I was also worried about giving Mario a chance to work at his best.
Seems like you and Mario figured out a pretty good balance there with that symbiotic relationship, because I think that both delivery of the actual text and the art really complemented one another. You initially had published this in France, you said. Can you tell me when that was and what the initial title was?
The initial title was Cutting Edge.
Okay, it was still cutting.
So it was exactly the same. For once, the French accepted an English title, which is almost unheard of. We are pretty proud of that. And it was, I don't remember, but quite a while ago. It was probably 2011, 22.
So when the translation came to for the English release, was there anything that was difficult to transfer based on language, or do you think that it was really just basically a exact retelling, but it just in English?
It was seamless because it was written in English to begin with. Even the
Oh,
dialogues were in English originally before being published. So there is another English version of this story, which has never seen light, which only Mario and I know, and the editor and David Chauvel, so which is in English anyway. So
that's awesome. That's funny when you think about it. It makes sense. Um, so then I wanted to know, as far as cutting edge goes, is there anything else that you would like to explore in this same universe going forward? Not necessarily like a follow-up to this, but anything that's in the same universe, or would you prefer to explore something else and a different genre if you were to do another comic book project today?
I would love to do other comic book projects, and I have ideas. There are other genres I'd like to explore. I'd like to explore the Western, which is an incredibly visually interesting genre. Horror, which is one of my biggest passions ever. So I'd like to work with other genres. When it comes to cutting edge, the dream that Mario and I have is to have a chance to tell the story through the TV medium. Because when we started working on the story, frankly, TV wasn't there. But time has passed, and quite quickly as well. And now it would be feasible to do the story for the screen. There has been some quite interest, but nothing serious so far. But we'll see. It's just a dream.
So are there any other projects that you're in the works on right now, or are you just focused on cutting edge and pushing this new version of cutting edge?
Well, I'm focused right now. I'm focused on pushing this new version. I'm focused on my next two novels because I have a novel coming out in June 2022 and another sometimes in 2023, which I'm finishing now. And I have another novel coming out in Italy, which is still different, always in 2022. A young adult novel, my first YA novel. So I'm a bit nervous about it because it's another new thing, which I never did before. But that's in Italian, so it's quite hard to get for my English readers, but definitely there is a new English book in 2022. So I very focused on that. Once that is done, I hope to have some time to think about comics again. I would really love before the next novel. I would really love writing a graphic novel, a series, or something like that.
So when you did the you had said that the I'm sorry, I had a short brain fart. You had said that you have an English novel coming out next year. Do you have a title for that already, or can you talk about what it
Never
is
do
about?
wind.
Never do end.
Never do wind. Yeah.
Oh, never the win. Okay,
Never
so
doing. We didn't do any the official cover reveal yet, but it should come at some point. Never
okay,
doing.
cool. Well, I think that's pretty much everything that I have for you. Is there anything about cutting edge that I didn't ask that you'd like to convey to readers and listeners?
I think one of the things I'm really proud of Cutting Edge when I think back of it, and it's been quite a few years since I wrote it. But one of the things that really make me proud is that it is a grand adventure story, in which we tried to say something about humanity, about what it is, what it feels like to be human, and what it feels like to be human through the strange, difficult time that we are going through. We didn't know yet how difficult and strange those times would become. It was before COVID, it was before Brexit, it was before Trump. So we had no idea of the madness that there was there was arriving. But even there, but it was after 2008, so it was after the financial crisis.
Right.
And in a way, we were seeing a strange new world, not necessarily a pleasant one, come, and the importance of fighting back the way we can. So I'm quite proud of that.
Well, is there anything social media wise, any websites that you'd like listeners or readers to go to?
I'm crap at social media. I have I'm really really bad. I'm not on Facebook, not at all. I don't have any secret name that you can actually find. No, I'm just really, I promise, I swear I'm not on Facebook. I I have a Twitter account which if you want to follow me, it's F Dimitri. My handle is F Dimitri, but it's quite forlorn, so I don't tweet a lot. I have very small. I recently opened an Instagram account just to be in touch with my friends, and some readers follow me there as well. And the handle is Messapian Frank, but that's even more forlorn and even less interesting. So I would suggest you not to follow me on social media because I see much worse than I hope my work is.
That's hilarious. Is there any other things that you'd like to plug before I wrap, or does that pretty much
No, I think
wrap it
this
up?
pretty much covers it.
Okay, awesome. It's been great talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.